Welcome back to Life Design Diaries. I'm Ross Mangini, and today we're bringing you an episode from inside my guest's beautiful home in Windsor. It's a Friday, the sun is beaming, and I've arrived at his house where he's working from home today. I'm speaking with Jamal Benmiloud, and I have to say, he's one of those people who, when you meet for the first time, you just get an instant warm reaction from them, almost as if he's a long-lost best friend and we're simply just catching up. He's someone who you could describe as just gets it. Jamal is a marketeer and a very good one at that. He excelled during his corporate life to become head of marketing at Redbull and vice president of marketing at rival Monster Energy. But then something happened. Jamal explains exactly what happened during this conversation, but you really aren't going to want to miss that. In 2012, Jamal took the decision to leave his successful career to take the leap and start his own consultancy, Earn Studios. This decision has also led to tremendous growth, with him now working with amazing brands, including one that we've had on this podcast before, Huel. Jamal now spends part of his time as non-executive director of Huel, and if you haven't heard of how incredible a business Huel is, listen back to episode 34 where I talked to the founder, Julian Hearn. It's our most successful episode to date. So Jamal, how exactly did you get to become non-exec director of Huel?
Well, it was pretty much luck, to be honest. I mean, how it came about was I just started hearing about Huel. It just started as a company. And actually, I was going through LinkedIn one day and Julian's profile came up and I noticed that he went to Bournemouth University, which is where I'm from.
Right.
So I just linked in and, and from that, he then came back to me pretty soon after that and suggested we meet up. And we met up. And I think I was really struck by him as a founder, his vision for the business. He'd been successful before in a previous business and really wanted to grow something he was really proud of. And, that excited me. And I think that from my point of view, I guess I could bring some experience from like the food and drink world, from the brand world that I kind of come from. And there seemed to be a really good fit. So from that point on, we had a few meetings, but then became a non-exec of Huel and have been in on this amazing rocket ship of a ride since then. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much involvement do you have now then, being a non-exec?
So non-exec, the way it works, and this was my first real non-exec role, generally it's once a month we meet up for about half a day, and the simple way of looking at it is that Julian and the management team will come with a whole list of things that they want to discuss and get our experience about, and we'll do the same. We'll come to that meeting with some things that we've been thinking about through the month. And you have a board meeting and you look at various things within the business to make sure it's all running well, but also really the focus is how are we going to grow the business, long-term strategy.
Yeah.
And then the other half day I get is you're always thinking about the business. You're always available to the team, to pass on any advice or connections. And throughout the month, there's sort of bits and pieces to sort of support the team.
Yeah. Okay. And at the moment you also have your own agency, don't you? So Earn Studios. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how you operate. And I'm particularly interested because if you look back at your career history, you've obviously got some very senior marketing roles at Redbull and then Monster, and then you decided to start this agency yourself. So what was the decision behind that? Why did you decide to switch across and go it yourself?
A really well-paid job of a successful company like Monster to start my own agency. I think looking back at that time, I'd done 5 years at Monster and it was an amazing experience doing really some, and had a fantastic team. But from a lifestyle point of view, I was on a plane most weeks because we were at that stage across Europe building about 50 markets. And so I just wanted a change in lifestyle. I want to spend more time at home with my sort of young family. And also as a marketeer, felt that I needed the next challenge. And by becoming a consultant, it would allow me to then go into lots of different businesses, work with lots of different CEOs and CMOs, and see if I could put the things that I learnt at Redbull and Monster into practice, but also learn by doing, And, my first client was Castrol. Second client was working for the CMO at Samsung. And it all went from there. And I think with each different business I work with, I learn more that I can then take on to the next project. And so I just keep growing that way. as a marketeer. So that's kind of why, for lifestyle and for growth, that's why I left.
Okay. And did you leave with nothing kind of set up? At the time, that was a complete salary drop off.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have some money from shares, so Monster's done very well from a shares point of view in my time there. So that gave me a small buffer, but not a long one.
Yeah.
And enough to take the jump and go, well, look, if this consultancy thing doesn't work out and no one wants my time or advice or ideas, then of course I'll go back and get another job. But thankfully, pretty soon after leaving, my first contract was with Castrol.
Yeah.
And we ended up actually winning the activation of their sponsorship of the World Cup. And the film that we ended up doing for them, which ended up being the most shared film in the world. So it was like the best first project we could have had, really amazing results. And from there sort of has then, gone on to help us win other projects.
Well. Yeah. So you mentioned one of the key sort of motives for you to leave is your lifestyle. You want a different lifestyle. So what are you aiming for there? It sounds like there was a period where you went, actually, I'm not happy with the amount I'm not seeing my family, kids, etc. And did you sort of plan out and write? Did you write it? Did you actually think what kind of structure do I want as a lifestyle? And then you've now tried to build it around that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That I do remember actually going and sitting down in a coffee shop and thinking about what's going to make me happy in my life, right?
Yeah.
And very much my family and my friends are kind of crucial to me, and if I can be a good dad, a good husband, a good friend, then I feel like, I've got the energy to then go and, do well in a career. And then from a career point of view, I wanted to be the best marketeer I could be, which again pointed to being a consultant because, it allowed me to have all these different experiences. But I did write it down. And actually every year, at Christmas time or between Christmas and New Year when things are generally quite quiet, my wife and I, we'll go through a review of how the year went, with our family and the business, and start to think about what are the things that we want to focus on for the next year.
Right.
And we make quite big decisions every year about, what we want to do. But again, number one is lifestyle. We need to bring in a certain amount of money, but we want to be there for our kids and enjoy this time of our lives.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when they get older and teenagers and don't want me around, then that's probably when I can go and be on a plane a bit more. But while they're young, I want to be there for them. Right.
Okay. Do you think that's a process a lot of people do or don't do?
I don't know I'd probably not. And I think I was quite fortunate in the timing of it because, as I said, I'd done my 5 years at Monster, I had a little bit of money and savings. So I was able to take that jump, but it was really stressful. I mean, looking back, the point at which I have to leave a full-time job, I've got a mortgage, I've got sort of quite high outgoings anyway, and there was no definite job on the table, project on the table, so it was really stressful. But ultimately, I had the backing of my wife, who was who believed in me and said, you should just do what you believe is the right thing to do. And because of that support, I did it. And actually, 6 years on, touch wood, people still want to work with me as a consultant. And now with Huel being a non-exec, I'm sort of now looking forward to, maybe one or two other non-exec roles where I can help entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. Yeah. So the line that I've now evolved is the plan is there's no plan. Okay. And actually, that's quite a cool place to be. And also being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Those two things for me are sort of, seeing me right that, as much as possible, I look to next year and I'll have something of a vision for what I would like to achieve next year with my time and also in work. But also, being flexible that, things come up that you might need to sort of jump on.
Yeah, I love that, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Yeah. And I also think that's something which you have to get used to when you make that step, isn't it? Because I imagine before then you were kind of climbing the corporate ladder, as it were, with job security, sort of getting pay rises, getting promotions, and you never kind of had that real uncomfortableness to your sort of lifestyle. Yeah,
you do. I think you have it early on. No, yeah. So there's two things there. So what I loved about Redbull and Monster is that, if you look back at my time at Redbull, every year there was always a different event or a different property to build, right? So, the first time we put a plane through some pylons or organised an air race, or that's exciting, right? So there's always the challenge every year with Red Bull. And when I went to Monster, the challenge was, oh my God, I've never been a VP of marketing before, and there was no team, there was no business. And so growing something from scratch was a challenge. But over time, if you do it right, you should ultimately make yourself redundant. And I found that, if I went into another job from Monster, I couldn't see a challenge that was going to be as scary or exciting, in equal measure. But actually taking the jump, I had to take the jump because I'd much rather have failed, and there was a high chance of failure, and go and get another job than be 60, 70 years old and go, well, I've never taken that risk.
Regretted it.
That was really important to me, even though it was really scary because there's no money coming in or guaranteed. I'd much rather have failed and gone, well, at least I tried to create my own business, and followed my heart a little bit more. Yeah,
absolutely. I want to just quickly ask you about these goals that you said that you set. I'm particularly interested in, when we've talked previously on the podcast about goal setting, and we've given our thoughts on what me and Lucy do. But you said once a year. Is it a yearly thing? Is there a date? Like the actual specifics of that? How does that?
So I have, so once a year, I go back through the goals from the previous year and we'll write new ones. But essentially it starts off with a summary of kind of what I want to achieve in my life, some of my key values, and then starting to look at different areas of my life, whether it be kind of career or my family or my friends or my health. There's sort of key areas that you would look at. Yeah. And then I personally then look at all those different aspects and go, okay, what can I improve? And what decisions do I need to make to perhaps make, my health more of a priority for next year? What things do I need to say no to, which I've had to with my with certain projects. So, for example, I don't travel as much as I used to, because that way it's better for my health and more time for my family. So it just allows you, by putting it into those different areas, to make decisions on your future goals for the year based on the things that are important to you. And then I have that as a 1 or 2 page sort of document that I keep with me for the year, and I refer back to every now and again just to see how things are going. But it's interesting because when you make really big decisions and you put it on a piece of paper, you can sort of stick to it. And sometimes those things are really difficult things to do, but because you've written it down and you go back to it and you've got the agreement, like I have with my wife, that we are going to do, X, Y, and Z, then generally those things tend to happen. Yeah. But when you just have conversations and you don't write it down, it's very easy to just move on. So that's why I find it as a structure. And it's also great because my wife and I then have that lovely time over Christmas and New Year. The kids are in bed and we get to sort of just talk about and reflect a little bit about the year, but also what we both want as a couple going forward. So I find it a really sort of positive structure.
That's good. And how much does the fact that it's you two kind of making that agreement, do you keep each other accountable? Like, how does that work?
Well, I try to put into my diary these turning it very business-like, and I put these like quarterly things in, which never really happen. So actually the real structure is it's something for yourself. It's not something that I will, I won't keep my wife accountable. She went with me, but it is something that, when I look back at my goals, I get towards the end of the year and I use it to reflect on what I want to do the following year. But it's kind of, so far it's worked really well for us.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you mentioned that we've talked about the fact that you you've started a marketing agency called Own Studios, and that's kind of been your vehicle to work with not just Huel, but loads of kind of top level, really, really exciting consumer brands. Are they all consumer brands?
Yeah, most of them are. I mean,
yeah. So, but what I'm particularly interested in is your kind of model with that, because I guess you've done it very differently to what a lot of marketing agencies would be, which is kind of grow the head count, have projections to get more people in and take on more roles. But so you keep things very, very lean, don't you, within Earn?
Yeah. So it's a model that I really believe in, which is ultimately the people want to work with me or the people around me because of our thinking and ideas, and therefore. Earn is me plus the people that I bring on from a freelance point of view, project by project. And it's the same model, by the way, that we had at Red Bull and at Monster, is that once you decide what your strategy is or what your idea is, you then need to go and get the best people you possibly can to deliver it. So that's what we do. So, once we have an idea for one of our clients, we then build up a team, we deliver that, and then they disband once the project is over and the results are got, and then you move on to the next thing. So it allows you to be really flexible. And for me personally, it allows me to pretty much live where I want to live, and be flexible about the projects I take on, because I don't have a high ongoing cost base. Effectively, I can choose some of the work that I want to do and also some of the work that I don't want to do. When you have a high cost base and you have a lot of people working for you, you generally have to say yes to everything. So it's allowed me to to be selective and hopefully choose the projects we can actually really be excellent at and deliver great results, which, touch wood, we have so far.
Yeah.
And also I'm also challenging the whole agency model about how you get paid, because we've now moved to a revenue share model where we come up with inventions, because people come to us for either marketing consultancy or innovation.
Right.
So when we come up with an innovation, a new product or a service, is that now we're getting paid in a revenue share model. So once that product comes to market, we then share in the revenue for life of that. And so it just makes it very fair for the client, for us as the consultancy partner, that we all sort of share in the upside of our ideas.
And I guess what that really does as well is, in terms of incentive, and gets your buy-in, because I guess one of the, like you said about the flexibility to work with different people, I suppose the counter argument sometimes to the sort of consultancy route is that actually they're not quite. You could take someone on if you choose the wrong person that's maybe not as bought into the project, and because it's a project work, after a number of months, then they're off to the next thing, and that's kind of how that goes, regardless of whether the project works successfully or not. But like you say, if you're working on the rev share model, I imagine that's flipped upside down, isn't it, really? Because it's absolutely in your interest.
Totally. I mean, it's similar to the non-exec. So I'm a non-exec of Huel, so everything I do is about building the every idea I have, or a piece of advice I give is like, it's all about for the good of Huel. It's not for the good of my short-term gain, right? And I love that way of working, because essentially it means that you're working with someone, not for someone. And it's the same with the consultancy. Okay, if I'm non-exec and I don't have equity, but with the work I do, if we can have a rev share, then essentially it's the same model. And you're coming up with things for the benefit of them long term, because you get a slice of that. Yeah,
absolutely. Staying with the fact that Earn Studios is on a very lean model, I think there's quite a bit of a paradox with people that want to start their own business, because they see it as freedom. They're in a paid role with a salary, and they want freedom to live on their own means. However, what then very quickly happens is they dive into their own business, they start getting clients, maybe they recruit a few people, and then they're absolutely trapped within inside their own business, and they can never take a day off, they can never take a holiday, because all of a sudden they are the linchpin of the business. But it seems like you've managed to really construct a way where you kind of keep that freedom. You've managed to make that transition and still be on your own terms.
Yeah, I don't know how much freedom I have, other than, I guess, location freedom. I mean, a lot of our clients are in London and New York. So there is still, a hell of a lot of sort of work and travel that goes with it. But I think that the great thing about having a lean team, i.e. sort of working on the freelancer model, like you say, is that you are free to choose what projects and what clients you want to work with. And I don't mean that in a sort of arrogant way of, there's a whole list of people that want to work with us. It's more, when you can really deliver something great and you're going to enjoy the work that you do, then you go forward with them. I do think, it's not for everyone, but for me personally, yes, it allows us to kind of do quite senior level consultancy, bring on the best talent we can to work with, and hopefully enjoy what we do in the process.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you mentioned when you joined Monster, you were particularly interested in them because they don't spend money on marketing, on adverts. Sorry, not marketing, on adverts. Why is that particularly interesting? Because that, just talking before that we started recording here, that's kind of followed you through now, isn't it? Into a bit of an ethos, really.
Well, after Redbull and Monster, I spent a couple of years writing this book called Brand Love, and it was really, again, part of my journey to learn about how other brands have built such amazing followings, right? And how they got other people to participate in the growth of their businesses, like we did at Redbull and Monster. But I moved to Monster for two reasons. One was, like you say, their model of marketing was about not advertising, which I just I'm not anti-advertising, but I just feel like it should be the last thing on your list, not the first thing. And the other thing was that, Monster was able to create an affinity with its customers that I had never seen before, even though it was like early on. So yeah, I'm really sort of almost obsessed by this idea of, how can brands be built with their customers as opposed to being advertising to customers. And so the brands I love are like Lego, Xiaomi from China, and a lot of what we do with our clients is try and get them to sort of focus on marketing that builds a community and gets their customers kind of sharing their marketing on their behalf. So yeah.
And what does that, like, if we're talking some specifics, what does that really look like if you don't want to spend too much money or any money on advertising, and you want, kind of the Huel effect where people are absolute brand advocates early on? How do you start? What was the key things to look at there?
Well, the amazing things that Huel did early on were, it was a very sort of open sourced kind of brand. So if you look at it, they started with a forum early on, so that everyone was invited to feedback on all elements of the product or marketing or service. Huel would send, and still does send, a t-shirt and a shaker, so it gives you a lot for your money basically when you get your first order. So really invests in customers in a way that maybe other brands didn't. So that's an example of how you build sort of brand advocacy and brand love. And then I'm just sort of looking over at one of the projects we worked on, which was building a premium mixer brand called Merchant's Heart with a company called Suntory here in the UK. And so range of sort of tonics and mixers, but they have very little marketing. So rather than advertising, what we did was put it into creating this really cool magazine called Campai. And that magazine is sold in newsagents around London. It's in hotels and bars. So we took that small amount of marketing, turned it into a quarterly magazine. So ultimately it breaks even or makes a small profit on some of the advertising that we sell. So we managed to increase their marketing budget by 3 or 4 times by, instead of just advertising, by actually creating marketing that people will buy. So that's sort of the thinking, is that, how do you kind of reward your customers in a way that they'll share the brand and advocate the brand, advertise the brand to their friends and family, or, like Lego do with their movies, how do you come up with marketing and advertising essentially that people pay for? So those are sort of the 2 ways of doing it.
Okay, and I'm sure every business is different, but if we were talking about like the initial amount of people to get that kind of ball rolling, is there do you have an approach to say, I don't know, start with 10 people or 1,000 people? So what sort of scale are we talking there?
Well, it's more of a philosophy. Like, it's better to start, and create fan by fan, right? So usually people talk about numbers when they're advertising. You need a certain amount of people to get the right kind of reach and then conversion, et cetera, et cetera. But if you flip it on its head and just reward every first customer that comes through with a great service or whatever it might be, then the idea is that it has the multiplier effect. We were talking before, we sort of started about Airbnb and how they, when they started Airbnb, they went to all the first apartments, they took professional shots, they over-delivered on a service, which wasn't scalable, but that in our digital age means that it then, it became viral, and, we know what it is today. That's kind of our focus, is how can you over-deliver to the first few customers so that they then carry your brand to their networks. Yeah, totally. I think that's a great piece of a mentality and ethos, really. And is that the main message? Because, like you said, you've written a book called Brand Love. I guess, first of all, how was that process in writing a book, and why did you decide to write a book? It was actually the author Graham Brown, who's written a few other brilliant marketing books that I always loved and was a fan of. He asked if I was interested in writing a book. What did I ask him? I can't remember.
So you were approached, right?
Oh no, I'm not sure. I'm not gonna say which one it was because I can't actually remember. But I do remember that it took a lot longer than I thought it would. So it was a process of 2 years, and it was written with another guy called Paul O'Shaughnessy, who was a ex-CEO of a mobile company in New Zealand. So he was based in New Zealand. I think Graham was based in Japan, and I was here in the UK. So to get the right time zone, every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m, we'd have an hour. We would talk about the chapter that we were writing, and that would be sort of our hour for that week. But the whole process took 2 years to go from getting the concepts down, getting it written, and then pulling the whole book together to it going up on Amazon. But yeah, it was a brilliant process. It took longer than I thought, but I'm really pleased I did it in the end, because it's nice to have everything down on paper that you sort of believe in.
Yeah, and how do you manage the co-writing aspect? Do you take sections or thoughts, or is it about someone proofreading and things like that?
Yeah, so it was like Graham was definitely the lead in this. He is an author. I'm not an author. I might have ideas and thoughts and whatever, but and the way it would work is that he would put the first draft down on page after our session, and then we would come back with sort of additions and reviews of that, etc. So he would take the lead out of the three of us, and we would just kind of build on the sort of work that he did. So that's how we did it.
Right, okay. Just whilst we're on books, I'm always fascinated about asking people about what kind of books they recommend, or what books have been a big source of inspiration for them. So have you got any recommended books on this bookshelf behind me?
There's one. Let me have a look.
What's this?
So I'll just grab one book, which is, I guess, my go-to book at the moment. So one thing I'm fascinated by is how marketeers can move more to inventors. And a lot of the consultancy work I do, or the workshops that I do, is trying to just get people excited again about doing marketing. And actually, I think the key to great marketing is to invent as opposed to advertise, right?
Okay.
So one book that's really sort of struck me is one called One Simple Idea. And I'll just see who it's from. Sorry, Stephen Key, and he's an inventor. So he talks about how the process of inventing and how you take a concept and license it, which is his model, which is something actually that we've done, and one of our ideas will be licensed and coming out in the new year, which is cool. So that would be a book I would recommend to anyone, particularly who has an idea, or of a product or a service, or just an idea that they think has value. His book is a really awesome kind of step-by-step guide of how, with very little investment, you can take a concept to turning it into revenue through licensing.
Right.
And little things like you don't have to spend lots of money on IP and patents and all of that. And actually, a lot of it is just about having a concept that's really clearly communicated on a piece of page and getting it into the hands of the right people. And yeah, I found that a really sort of inspiring book recently.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for sharing. Now, you said just then as well about the fact that you're transitioning to more of an idea, concept-based, product-based company for yourself. Mm-hmm. A lot of people I know listening to this want to start their own business, but one of the big things that they struggle with is the idea, actually having a concept. Mm-hmm. So I know I haven't read that, and I'm probably going to read that, and I'll probably have the answer in there, but is that quite an analytical approach to doing that, or is it kind of a by chance, by experience, something that you spot in the marketplace? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that
because just to add to that, because some of the people, it's been fascinating. So I would have naturally said it was based on experience, and chance meets opportunity, really, of you thinking and trying to see something. But we've had some people on the podcast where they've met every single week to brainstorm, and then they've distilled those into other ideas, and it's been like a rigorous process to actually get. And to be fair, I started a business on the back of it. So it's just interesting to hear your approach.
My experience is that I over the last few years would have ideas in different different environments, and I ended up writing probably about 30 or 40 ideas down as my list of ideas. And I was definitely, one of the reasons why I left Monster to start my own business was to see if I could bring some of those ideas to life. And I have. And I think there's something really powerful about, again, putting something on paper, and they were literally just a bullet point of ideas that you can refer back to. And when you see an opportunity, it suddenly becomes something that you can actually make real. And so my experience is by having a volume of ideas, and then, spending time looking through that, and as and when you meet people, or as and when you kind of have the opportunity, you see if you can bring one of them to life. That's the model I've worked. So it's not an analytical one. It's not looking at necessarily trends and seeing what's going to blow up and going after that, which is more of an investment model. I didn't have money to invest necessarily in businesses in that way. It was more to kind of bring ideas that I wanted to bring to life. That was the way I went about it. So yeah, just having a whole list of ideas and seeing at the right moment when you can make them happen.
Yeah. Okay. I may be kind of over laboring the point, but I want to come back to that period of when you decided to move from Monster and start up yourself. And actually, in reference to a conversation I've had with a friend recently, we were just discussing about, often you get to a point when you've climbed the career ladder so that you've achieved, you've done well, and what that's doing is that's building your own confidence as you get better and better. And there becomes a point when you're almost at a very senior position in a salaried job when you think, actually, I can do this myself. And that's an ideal position to be in. What we were talking about is the transition then to doing it yourself. You're then starting again from almost ground zero. So it's like you're taking almost the biggest leap of faith. It's not a case of you were at zero and you started from zero. You've actually built up, this kind of position. So I just want to go back to like how you felt at that exact stage. Was it as easy as it sounds that you've now transitioned and everything's going well with where you are now, or what did that look like?
Well, if I'm honest, before I made the decision, something that was eating away in my brain a little bit was a need to be in control of my own life and my own destiny, and also my finances. And what I didn't want to happen is that I carried on working for someone and keep climbing the ladder. And at some point, I sort of look at myself in the mirror when I was sort of 50 or 60 or whatever. And one, had never tried to do something myself and failed, which was fine, as I said before. But two, also be beholden to a company that can make a decision very quickly and then I'm out of a job. And I didn't like that, as the breadwinner in my family and, as a father to my boys. I kind of I definitely had something inside me which was wanting to show that I could, have my own business, be my own boss, be in control. And therefore, even little things like, if my sons were playing football or rugby on a Wednesday, and I can do it without any guilt or without, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are really important things for me, but at the same, so those are all the things that were pushing me to leave. But the hard thing was, I was I was VP of Marketing at Monster Energy. It was like, amazing. And the moment I knew was when, so this is going to sound silly, but I was at a conference, a big conference for Coca-Cola, because they were our distributors, and it was at Wembley Stadium, right? So there I was, and I love this, doing public speaking, talking in front of a huge crowd, getting them excited about, Monster and the plans for the next year.
Yeah.
But I remember driving home, and I actually, when I got home, I couldn't remember the drive home, which was quite scary for me because that had never happened before. And for a few days after that, I almost blanked out and had what I've been told is an experience. So like, whatever you want to call it, it was a real moment for me to go, I couldn't really leave the house for a couple of days.
Really?
And there was something sort of eating away at me that I'd never experienced before, because, I'm very happy in my life. I'm very blessed with my sort of family and friends, everything. But there was something that really struck me, obviously, in that made me go, no, I need to change something. And I think it wasn't that I was bored, because obviously Monster was a very interesting challenge, but it wasn't enough for me, and it wasn't enough of a challenge. And so after conversations with my wife, and she could see that I wasn't that happy, that I needed to do something about it. And so the reason I had that experience, when I look back, was I was so scared about failing from a financial point of view and not being able to pay the mortgage. And I was catastrophizing in my head that all the worst things that could happen.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, or when I had a conversation with my wife about what really is the worst that can happen, the worst that can happen is I have to get another job. The worst that can happen after a few months of not being able to start a business and make some money is I go and get another job. And we're so blessed where we live, the lives that we have. That's nothing, and when you start to see that if really that's the worst that can happen, that's amazing, and change my sort of psychological kind of look on life. And then I had the energy to then go and speak to my boss at the time and say I wanted to leave and the reasons why, and they were really amazing about it. And then turn that into a positive way of looking at it and going, right, I'm now gonna go and speak to people and say I'm going to be a consultant, and ended up getting the work with Castrol, which was amazing. But it was really, really tough. So I feel for people that are going through it. But at the end, all I would say is, as most entrepreneurs will say to me, just do it. If you really feel it's something in you, just do it, because even if you fail, you'll learn way more during those months that you can put into practice in the next thing that you do, than by sort of, just taking the easy option and staying in employment if it's not what you actually want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our previous episodes with Susie Walker at the Primal Pantry, her kind of whole ethos was, what's the worst that can happen? She ended up saying that so many times throughout the interview. It was like most decisions were based on, actually, what's the worst that can happen? And just reframing that, because I think you just need to remind yourself sometimes of that, can't you? Feel like you've built up this comfort blanket. And like you said, it's fear-led as to why you're not making that decision. And
all entrepreneurs, even like I read Richard Branson's book, he'll talk about fear that's in your gut, right? There would be lots of times where you just have this fear, and you sort of, and you can actually feel it. And it might be because you're starting, again, to do something you've never done before, or you need to go and earn a certain amount of money for the year, or whatever it might be. And that doesn't really exist when you're in full-term employment, because you don't have that level of challenge. But where as you go on, you get when you recognize it's a fear, then you can turn it around to being, no, this is just, this, you can turn it into excitement pretty quickly.
Yeah. And after that, was there a point when you actually thought, maybe I should go back? Was there a low point of being self-employed where you reconsidered?
No, I was pretty lucky that I got some consultancy work pretty soon after that.
Okay.
And have been very lucky since that point. So, it's a positive story for me. Definitely I've taken on projects that have been really difficult, some that haven't gone as well as others, tough times with clients, all the normal stuff that happens. But, overall I look back and go, it's definitely the right decision for me.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased, I've done it, I look at the life that I've got with my family, and it's all the things that I wanted it to be. So for anyone that is thinking of taking the leap, then, as long as it's something that, they really in their gut need to do, I just say, just do it.
Just do it, yeah. Is there anything that surprised you about now being self-employed?
I think when I started, I was using a lot of the sort of traditional rules of, how to promote myself, get work, promote the agency. And I thought that, the rules were that you had to generate PR, and you had to be, someone that was an influencer within the agency space, but it's something I'd never really done myself. But when I look back at all the work that we've won, it's all been through recommendation. It's all been through personal contacts, or someone who's moved from one company to another wants to work with us again. And it's very simple. It's more simple than I realized, actually.
Okay, yeah.
When you're starting a business like mine, which is a consultancy, it goes back to relationships. It's people by people. And if you have some relationships that are, are real, based on respect of the work that you do, vice versa, that's where all the work has been won. And, we've got amazing clients, work with, on some amazing projects. But when I look back through all of them, it's through connections, and that was a surprise.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great advice. And like you said, it can be easy to get caught up in the wrong thing at that moment, like thinking you need to be the influencer within the industry, which takes a lot of time in itself. Yeah.
I mean, they're great people that work, Social Chain. They do a great job on that, and there are definitely businesses where that model works. But almost like you see that and you think, well, gosh, is that the way that it works for all business? It's not. It's not at all. It all comes down to, if I had a restaurant, I would know that it's the first customers that come through the door. Those are the most important thing. How do you make them your advertisement for, getting future people through, really working your connections to, make it the best business it can be. It's always very, very simple,
Simplicity.
Yeah.
Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about your kind of transition and being self-employed. I actually want to go back a little bit further to when you were employed, because your titles and the brands and the companies that you've worked for are very prestigious. A lot of people would envy that role and would love to work for those companies. So how did you progress that far, that quickly? If someone here is actually that they don't want to start their own business, they're listening to this and they're thinking, I'm interested on how I can become VP of marketing at Monster. What would your kind of advice be there?
Well, there was a bit of luck in that.
Really?
Yeah, because when I was at university, someone gave me an advert for Redbull because they were looking for their first student brand manager. And someone on campus who was interested in marketing, although at the time I didn't know what marketing was about, but it talked about, was interested in running events and all that kind of stuff. And so that led me to then, meeting Redbull and becoming a student brand manager there, one of the first that they'd had. And so I learned about marketing through that program. Was exposed to, because at the time Redbull was very small, the MD and the marketing director, and learnt a huge amount from them. That was my marketing education, was being a student brand manager with those guys. And obviously that connection, that experience then led to them asking, I'd gone off and done other roles, but then asking if I'd come back and work for them full time at Redbull after university. So, that was my journey. But if I was giving any advice who wanted to go and work for a Redbull or a Monster or a brand that they really loved and respected, usually it's about getting in there as early as you can and looking at some of those sort of entry level jobs. Look at Redbull and Monster have sampling programs, they have ambassador programs, they have regional marketing programs. And if you do a good job, you stand out. You can climb pretty quickly through the work that you do. But the other thing is, applying direct. Don't be afraid to just pick up the phone or send a LinkedIn email direct. If you're the kind of person that wants something, then you've got to make it happen yourself. So in anything, with any job that you want, you should go after it and put yourself forward. So yeah.
Yeah, be proactive there. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that's a good place to kind of round up, because we've covered both sides. If you're looking to be self-employed and want to grow that way, but also if you want to just progress and develop within marketing anyway. So, Jamal, thank you very much for joining us. That was brilliant.
No, I loved it. Thank you.
And lastly, if anyone's interested in finding you on, having a look at your company, etc., what links can they find you at?
So earnstudios.com or me personally on LinkedIn. That's fine. So yeah, those are generally the two best places to check us out.
Perfect. Oh yeah, and the book.
And the book, oh yeah, that's true. The book Brand Love is available at Amazon, or so you can get the paper copy or Kindle if that's your preference.
Excellent. And I'll link to all of that in the show notes as well, so people can click there.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.